Welcome back to Flashpoint. This morning we're talking to the candidates for North Carolina State Treasurer. I am joined now by Democratic candidate for North Carolina State Treasurer, Wesley Harris. Wesley, thanks for coming back on Flashpoint. Good to see you.
It's great to be on. Thanks for having me.
All right, first off, give us your one-line sales pitch for why the people of North Carolina should elect you as State Treasurer.
Yeah, well, as the only PhD economist in the General Assembly, you'll be hard-pressed to find another legislator or government official in North Carolina that has a better feel for the finances of this state. And growing up in rural North Carolina as a product of North Carolina school systems, the son of a banker and a public school teacher, as I tell folks, put a banker and a state employee together, that is the treasurer's office. And so my background and experience growing up in North Carolina, serving North Carolina, makes me uniquely qualified to be able to take on this role. And I'm really excited to be able to do it for the voters in North Carolina.
You have said, but plenty of other people have said this as well, that the state pension is one of the best funded, but perhaps most underperforming in the country. And you argue, others argue the same, that state workers should be getting a much better return on their investment without being risky.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, we have a $125 billion pension plan, but 14% of that is sitting in cash. Last year, the Dow Jones had a return of about 20%, but our pension plan had only a return of about 8%. And that's the reason we haven't been able to give a cost of living adjustment to our retirees. And so there's no reason to have such a conservative approach when the stock market is doing so well, when the economy is growing. You have to take advantage of the good times. And if we're able to do that, which we should be able to do that without having to take on excessive risk, we can not only get the returns to provide a cost of living adjustment, we can actually be able to lower the employee contribution, which could free up some money to actually solve some other problems with state employees' benefits, such as the state health plan and other issues with the state government. So there are a lot of opportunities if we have slightly better returns with our pension plan.
Do you see a big difference? Because I know your opponent agrees that you should be more aggressive when it comes to investing the people's money. Where do you see the difference between you two?
The big difference is governance structure. Again, my opponent wants to take away sole fiduciary from the treasurer, where the treasurer, who is accountable to the people, who is accountable to the voters, makes the decision on how to invest the plan and give it to a committee that in North Carolina, if you take away power from one branch, you give it to the legislature. And the last thing we need in North Carolina is our legislature having more power to put their political appointees on there to invest the money however, the leadership of the General Assembly sees fit, as opposed to what the voters voted for with the state treasurer. And, we've seen this time and time again as our legislature has politicized so many parts of our state. Look at the UNC system and how many times that's in the news with the politicization of the Board of Trustees and the decisions they've been making. And we do not need that with our pension plan. Our state employees depend on the pension plan, and they need to know that the person making those decisions is accountable to the people, is accountable to the voters. And I take that very seriously. And honestly, that's why everyone who depends on the pension plan has endorsed this campaign. The North Carolina Association of Educators, the State Employees Association of North Carolina, the Professional Firefighters and Paramedics of North Carolina, and the Police Benevolent Association all say they want me to manage this because they know my vision, they know what they want out of the pension plan, and they know I will be accountable to the will of the voters.
Your opponent has described himself as, quote, a conservative in every sense of the word. You plan on taking a more progressive approach, but what does that look like when it comes to investing the people's money, and should those sorts of things matter?
They should matter in the sense that, my philosophy is companies that do good, do well. And we need to make sure that we're investing the people's money in companies that reflect the values of North Carolina. We don't want to send money to a company that's going to turn around and do things like raise prices on consumers in North Carolina. That hurt actually the people of North Carolina. And so there are a myriad of things you have to consider when you're looking at what companies you want to invest in. Mostly, you want to make sure you're investing in companies that have those great returns so that you can, provide the benefits for the state employees.
You mentioned a second ago about being a sole fiduciary here in the state. I think it's only one of a few in the country that's set up like that. What would you say to those who would argue that having a small group making these decisions is a better thing than one sole person? I understand you say that person is then accountable by voters, but any one person making decisions is a lot more perhaps risky than a group of people who are making that decision.
And again, that goes back to the election and who the voters choose. Again, just because you have sole fiduciary power doesn't mean you can't surround yourself with advisors. Again, when I'm talking to groups that depend on the pension plan, we're very open and honest in our communication of when I take office of working with them to making sure that we're investing the portfolio in a ways that, benefits their members in the best way possible and getting input from all of the people. And that's the choice of the individual treasurer and who the voters choose versus having a committee of folks that the voters really have very little say over because they're so insulated. And again, in North Carolina, you have a very gerrymandered legislature who has shown time and time again they want to put their thumb on the scales of anything they have power over, and having political appointees make those decisions that do not have any accountability to the voters. I think that in itself is setting it up for way more corruption than having someone who is accountable to the voters, who can surround himself with the people that they need to make the best decisions.
I want to ask you recently, Business North Carolina published an article raising questions about your lack of ownership of stocks or any real estate value over $10,000. That's not against the law. There's nothing that says you have to, but do want to give you the chance to respond to that.
Yeah, I believe in public service. I had a very great job when I started public service, but I believe in public service. I could have gotten very wealthy before I decided to join public service, but I looked at what was happening to the state and decided that we need to do this. But I'm a PhD economist with a specialty in public finance. I worked for a Big Four accounting firm valuing very large and complex assets and companies, looking at portfolio management, looking at how they're run. And again, I have the qualifications to do this job. That is why everyone who depends on this job has endorsed our campaign versus someone from Wall Street. It's the most Wall Street thing ever, saying that, oh, well, only Wall Street can deal with Wall Street, because God knows Wall Street has never guided us wrong in financial choices. And so I am very confident with my background, and the groups that depend on this are very confident with my background. And I'm very excited about what we're going to be able to accomplish for the people of North Carolina.
Democratic candidate for North Carolina State Treasurer, Wesley Harris. Wesley, thanks for coming on Flashpoint. Good to see you.
Thank you so much. Great to see you.